when we are young and we are not meant to process everything, we store sensation in our body. And the only way to heal attachment memories, attachment patterns is to go into the body, is to go into the sensation. And I really want the readers to have this light bulb moment that, oh my God, when this tightness happens in my chest or when my belly is feeling really queasy, that this is a young part of me. This is memory. And to get them to go from what I thought memory was to, oh my God, this is memory, we start to change the relationship that we have with the internal experiences in our body.
This is episode number 689 with Jessica Baum, How to Feel Safe in Your Romantic Relationships. Jessica has been on the show before, introducing her first book, which is called Anxiously Attached, and we are going to be talking about her second book called Safe today. Hi, everybody. I'm Sandy Weiner, certified dating and relationship coach. And every week I bring you expert advice and real conversations about love, connection, and how to have healthy relationships. Here at Last First Date Radio, we believe it is never too late to go on your last first date. For more information on my coaching programs, my courses, and my books, go to lastfirstdate.com. And before I bring on Jessica, I just want to invite you, if you're a woman over 40 and you're not yet a member of my Facebook group, Your Last First Date, I invite you to join us there. It is a safe and supportive space for women over 40 who are dating and looking for positive support, which is rare in the world of groups, especially in social media. So join us there at Your Last First Date. And now for my guest, Jessica Baum. She is a licensed psychotherapist and the author of Safe, Coming Home to Yourself and Others, and Anxiously Attached, Becoming More Secure in Life and Love. She explores the whys of life, why we feel, why we connect, and why we experience the world the way we do. This passion has led her to specialize in trauma, attachment theory, and interpersonal neurobiology. She believes that connection to ourselves and others is at the heart of healing, and she uses many modalities to help people return to wholeness. She's the founder of the Relationship Institute in Palm Beach, Florida, and she leads the Conscious Relationship Group, which is a global coaching company offering support to clients worldwide. Welcome to the show, Jessica.
Thanks for having me back. I'm excited for this conversation.
Me too. I wish I should have said welcome back. I did say that in the intro that we had you on before talking about your first book, which was so helpful. And I have both the books here. We have Anxiously Attached, excellent book. And I was so excited that you have another book about using the word safe, which I use a lot in coaching. When I help somebody create a must-have list, we start with safety. What would make you feel safe? Because people have these crazy must-have lists that are based on external stuff and things that don't matter, like owning a home. And at the bottom of all of it is safety, in my opinion.
I definitely agree.
Yeah. Yeah, we all need to feel safe. So let's start with attachment patterns and how they develop and how they can make us feel unsafe in our closest relationships.
Sure, yeah. So in the book Safe, I talk about attachment. Like I talk about the embedded patterns on how you develop them in infancy with your primary caregivers and in your home. And a lot of it is around the nervous system and your parents' nervous system and their sense of safety. We call it a ventral state, but their ability to feel safe in their own body enough to attune to us, to be emotionally present to us. So when they have a lot of safety within and they can be present, that is the primary ingredient for secure attachment. You'd think it was love, but it's really emotional presence and attunement. So when your parents are struggling with avoidance or anxiety or society or stress or whatever's going on, the baby senses disconnect, it senses the avoidance, it senses the anxiety. And depending on how that infant and young person is developing, we adapt according to our primary caregivers. So if we have a parent, for example, who's more anxious, anxious ambivalent is the right word for anxiously attached, but Mom is there sometimes and not there always because she's lost in her own anxiety and her nervous system is not with us enough. Again, it's not about being perfect. Then the young one learns abandonment could always be around the corner because that nervous system sense is not consistent enough. Or if another primary caregiver is there physically but emotionally not present, very much in their left hemisphere, thinking about tasks and not connecting emotionally to the infant, we're moving towards more avoidant tendencies. And then if the primary caregiver is really neglectful, really rageful, or really angry or dismissive, we move into disorganized pockets and patterns. So in SAFE, you start to learn how these embedded patterns begin from infancy and how they get embedded in our nervous system and how they show up later in our adult relationships and kind of recreate certain familiar patterns again. So I think it's really important that this book takes you from the inside out of how you developed your patterns and helps you then to overlay with the wheel of attachment how those patterns are showing up in your adult life.
Thank you for that concise explanation of how attachment begins and how our parents influence us. And many people have multiple core wounds. So you just talked about abandonment and some of the core wounds that show up when our parents are inconsistent or anxious or stressed out or all of the things that happen in early childhood. What happens if you have multiple core wounds? How do you deal with that?
Well, the belief around the wound is secondary. The wound usually lives in the body. And it's a feeling that happens when we're really small in terms of growing up in an environment, internalizing the felt sense of shame or the experience of abandonment. Those kinds of things live deeply embedded in our body. And so our body stores a charge. And I list a bunch of core wounds in the book. And part of dealing with core wounds is going to the charge in the body somatically with an anchor. I talk a lot about anchors in the book, holding the original event and understanding how you internalized different things. So it's complicated and it's layered. It's not such an easy thing to answer, but developmental shame, the easiest way I can try to explain that is that when you're growing up in a home and maybe your parents are struggling or they're fighting or there's chaos, when you're a small one, you don't have the emotional awareness to be like, something is wrong out there. My parent is stressed out. My parents are, you just sense that something's off. And to make sense of that, you think it's you. So you internalize the false sense that because they're not connecting and they're not present enough with me and I'm not feeling safe, there must be something deeply wrong with me. And that's actually an adaptive strategy to survive because we couldn't possibly comprehend that there's something wrong in the environment. That'd actually be very scary for a youngster. So that's a way to develop an adaptive strategy to survive. But that internalized shame gets tucked deep into our body and it's like the felt sense that something is wrong with me. And so we really have to go to those parts and be with them and understand why we developed them. And the same goes for the abandonment and, and other core wounds that we might have developed. We need to go to the original wound and understand how it was more adaptive and how we stored it in the first place.
And I'm imagining that some people struggle with that, with going back there, that it's so scary.
Yeah, I mean, so a big piece in SAFE is talking about nervous system to nervous system healing, and it's talking about real, genuine attachment healing. And when we've been wounded when we're tiny, and this lives in our nervous system and our being, we cannot heal without adult anchoring. So we need another nervous system to hold our nervous system as we go back there. That is the only way to heal early wounds. And so I explain the science behind that. So you don't do any of this real work alone. You're actually very accompanied and supported within it. And I don't necessarily think you need a therapist. I talk about anchors and you being co-anchoring with other people and how the earlier the wound, the more adult anchoring you need to move the wound out of the body, up through the streams of information and integrate it into your left hemisphere to actually evolve consciously and move past the wound to integrate the wound. We usually need a lot of support.
Yeah, so that's interesting that it's not just a therapist that can support you, it's having safe people who can co-anchor with you. And are these people trained in a certain way by like reading your book, or how would somebody co-anchor?
Yeah, so in the book, I talk about anchors, and everybody can find an anchor or can start to look for an anchor. But an anchor is someone who's non judgmental, who has a sense of safety within their system, who's pretty intact with their humanity, who's not trying to fix you, and is able to listen. So, believe it or not, like there's not a ton of like we need to find our anchors, and many clients come to me and say, I have no anchor, and I become their anchor. And then their nervous system starts to recognize that. And then they develop more anchoring people and they start to understand what true presence and emotional holding is. But finding your anchors, I don't believe that all therapists know how to hold space this way, but this book definitely helps therapists and it helps coaches and it is a companion. And also, some of my best anchors are my friends. I mean, I have an amazing therapist and I talk about that, but like anchoring can happen with safe relationships. And I spell out like the neurobiology of what a safe relationship is and how we need anchoring relationships to build inner security. Because that's the goal of the book is to become secure within. So we actually need the relationships on the outside to be internalized. That's what babies do. So I talk about it's the same process as an adult, a reinternalization through mirror neurons and resonance circuits that we're internalizing safe people and they become inside of us. They help us expand our own sense of safety.
Yeah, that it is such an important thing. And especially if you didn't grow up with it, you don't even know you're missing it sometimes, or you don't know what it looks like. And I certainly went through life with a lot of sarcasm, a lot of guards up because I didn't get the closeness I needed from my parents and the recognition. And my parents were just very self-involved. We do the best we can with the tools we have with just survival skills, but in order to really connect deeply, we have to do some of this deep inner work and find safe people and recognize safe people. And often when we recognize safe people, we push them away because they don't feel familiar. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, that also happened with me, and I see it happen with my clients all the time. It's like, it's so funny. We all want safe people, we all want those safe relationships. But if we grew up in a home with a lot of neglect, a lot of chaos, or more on the avoidance spectrum, and we don't even know, we're really detached from what we didn't get. When we start to slow down and we are in the presence of true safety, someone really holding space from a ventral place, what happens is it feels really uncomfortable in our nervous system. We're required to drop into vulnerability. There's more intimacy, and it can feel icky and weird and hard until your nervous system starts to register that as love and support. It feels foreign. And so, this is the reorienting towards safety comes with this portal of kind of experiencing that kind of holding over and over again till it's like, oh, I can move in this space and I can really be seen. And that's really hard for a lot of individuals. And so I think a lot of people want safety. Like when you said in the beginning, people might make their list, I want to feel really safe with someone. But I think feeling safe makes us vulnerable. And I think a lot of people struggle with that. So I also explore that deeply in the book because that's the portal. The vulnerability is the portal through deeper intimacy, deeper rupture and repair, deeper relationships, more meaning in your life. But it can feel really foreign to someone who's never received it. And when you've never received that kind of attunement and safety, and someone really just sitting there and going into your world, you start to realize, I didn't get this as a kid. So there's another whole level of grief that comes up for someone who's maybe got some avoidant protectors. Like, I'm experiencing this now as an adult, but I really needed this when I was tiny, and I need to be with the part of me that didn't receive that in the first place.
A lot of that mourning what you didn't have, but without blaming. And I think you mentioned that in the book. We don't walk around angry at our parents the rest of our lives. I have a brother who's still doing that, and he's in his 60s. I love what you said about experiencing safety over and over again and having it be part of your nervous system as opposed to a foreign part of your nervous system. And the other thing is that when I talk about safety with my clients in terms of the must have list, so When I create those must-have lists with my clients and I say, you want to feel safe in what way? So we might say, I want to feel safe emotionally. Then I say, who does he have to be if you want to feel safe? And so a lot of these women have grown up with insecurity. They have been in relationships where there were terrible arguments that never got resolved. They were always accused. There was defensiveness, so they didn't feel safe in communication, in being able to resolve conflict. So they want that in the next relationship, and then we work on having them have those skills too. And so, yeah, I see a lot of people who want something that they can't even do themselves. And so I find that to be something that is important to look at. And you also talk about healing in relationships. So you don't have to be fully healed and fully perfectly secure to get into a relationship, but you do have a recognized willingness to feel safe in certain ways, financially, emotionally, sexually, in all the ways that make a relationship healthy. I'd love to hear what you have to say.
It's an interesting topic. I think that a lot of people want to feel safe, but they don't understand what that safety really, I think a lot of people don't want to feel uncomfortable. So I think safety can actually make you feel incredibly uncomfortable, but I think people
Mm.
are confusing safety with comfortability, and those two things aren't the same thing. Actually, safety can bring a lot of intimacy and it can make us open up, but it also can bring a lot of vulnerability. And I think maybe some people are confusing, well, if my partner gets angry, or if my partner gets dysregulated, they're not safe, when that's not true at all. That's part of the human
Mhm.
experience. And that's part of a conscious relationship, and our partner is allowed to be all those things. So, it really depends on where your client's at, Sandy. So I don't know if that answers that question, but I think people are confusing a lot. And I think that your partner's allowed to get dysregulated. They're allowed to get angry. They're allowed to get upset. They're allowed to have bad days. They're allowed to have core wounds, all those things. But do they have the insight and the skills to rupture and repair? And that takes quite a bit of conscious awareness. And in Safe, I talk about becoming conscious of our own wounds and what we're projecting on others and how to break trauma bonds. So that's also, that's a lot of work to get the awareness around what is really safety, what am I asking for? And when my partner or friend does this, is it that they're not safe, or is it that I get dysregulated because it wakes something up within me? And those are two very different things. And you said something prior about our parents, and I want to make something really clear. And if you read Safe, you'll really understand it. But this is never about blaming our parents. And there might be a phase where you grieve what you didn't receive and you see your parents in a new light. But usually our parents are doing what they can with what they received. And I dive deep into intergenerational trauma. And none of my books are about blaming our parents or staying in some place of blame. I think it's important to be angry at some point around what you didn't receive, but you don't stay in that space. You move through that and you start to see your parents as individuals that are highly wounded themselves and what they received and how that lineage gets passed down.
Yeah, and I think that's such an important thing to think about. I think that helped me so much in my relationship with my mom in particular when I started to observe her very differently and I stopped reacting to a lot of the wounding. And she just really is not aware that when I need support, she doesn't know how to give it. And even though I've given her the script sometimes to, this would be supportive, mom. It's not the way she can process. And I've been learning more and more about her childhood, which she was talking about the other day about her parents and how loving they were and how they had no space for anyone else. And so the message I got as a child was I had the most loving parents. And what I didn't see was, and I was neglected. And what she doesn't see either is how hurtful that was. Like she doesn't see the connection. She just says, "Oh, my parents were amazing. They were so loving. They never saw us." So it's really an interesting thing to be able to see it with perspective, without reactivity, with compassion, and without having an expectation that she's going to be any different than she is, which is hard.
I mean, all of that is true. And I think when you do the inner work with your inner child and you start to see what you didn't get, there is a place of anger and frustration. Like I've gone through a lot of suffering in my life because my parents were too stressed out to be emotionally available. My dad struggled with substance abuse. My mom was very occupied with survival in her career. And I was very neglected. And it has deeply impacted me. And I went through a period of like really embodying that impact, right, in my body, in my soma, and understanding why I pick particular people in my romantic life. And I openly share. And as I evolve, and I talk about this in Safe, and this might be really advanced for the listener, but I talk about healing with your parent, the internalized parents that we have. I talk about looking just at what you're looking at is what did they receive? And where are their wounds and how did their wounds show up and how are they functioning in the world. Many of our parents in our generation didn't get the message, hey, go out and heal intergenerational trauma, hey, do this work. There were a lot of avoidance and a lot of workaholism. That was really how that culture or that generation was taught to achieve. And you should go out there and you should perform and you should be busy and you should do and you should all these messages that I got, which really put you in the left hemisphere. And I go into the hemispheres of the brain deeply and Safe. And then we become like little performers that are disconnected from our body when we're trying to do everything that we kind of adapted and learned that our culture needs to. And we're not connected to our pain. We're not connected to any deep meaning. We're not making meaningful relationships. So there's a lot of unpacking to do with not just what our parents give us, but what our culture passes through to us and gives us this false understanding of what it means to be successful and independent, how much that hurts us neurobiologically based on what we need to thrive, And so a lot of the book is the messaging around what we actually need as humans, which is connection and vulnerability and community and a sense of belonging. These are the ingredients that we need throughout our whole lives to thrive and really be in expansive states.
Let's take a quick break to hear from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Amazon Music Unlimited. You can listen to over 70 million songs and thousands of playlists and stations. Plus, you can now stream your favorite podcasts like Last First Date Radio. You can listen to any song, anytime, anywhere, on any of your devices. Get Amazon Music Unlimited for free for 30 days. Just head on over to getamazonmusic.com/last-first-date to learn more and claim this offer. You also mentioned little me, giving yourself that love and compassion that you didn't get. Talk a little bit about what that is and how we can begin to heal the little parts of ourselves.
Yeah, so in Safe, I talk about implicit memory a lot. Like you can't leave this book and not understand what implicit memory is. So we have explicit memory, which is the kind of memory you think about when we're watching a movie. You can go back in your mind's eye. You can remember your trip to Disney World. Disney World. You can remember what it's like at your grandmother's house. Those are in explicit memory. Those are explicit. We have a story to it, a beginning, a middle, and an end. When we're born from womb to fore, and then throughout our lives, we are storing what we call implicit information. Implicit information lives as sensation in the body. So for all of those who've read my first book, Anxiously Attached, I talk about my gut, my heart dropping to the floor in the opening scene. In Safe, I talk about when we are young and we are not met and we go through certain connection experiences. When we're not met to process everything, we store sensation in our body, in our fascia, in our gut, in our heart, in our nervous system, and these patterns exist. And these patterns are stored parts of us that are either scared or hurting. Because we can't process them, they have to go somewhere. And they go in our soma, they go in our body. So I refer to that as little me. But in Safe, I know a lot of people think, oh, inner child, boo boo. I actually unpack the neuroscience of these memories and how they live in our body. And the only way to heal attachment memories, attachment patterns is to go into the body, is to go into the sensation. And I really want the readers to have this light bulb moment that, oh my God, when this tightness happens in my chest, or when my belly is feeling really queasy, that this is a young part of me. This is memory. And to get them to go from what I thought memory was to, oh my God, this is memory, we start to change the relationship that we have with the internal experiences in our body. So if you're listening, you're trying to heal attachment wounds, and your coach or your therapist isn't going into the body, into the sensational experience and holding this with you, you're not really getting to the root of the attachment wound. And it's really important that you start doing this work. And this is why I wrote this book about getting to the sensations that live into the body, because those are your memory systems. If you want to call it little me, whatever it's called, those sensations have to be held. They have to be held in co-regulation, usually with another nervous system.
The body doesn't lie. And I think that we often neglect the body altogether. We just live in our thoughts and we try to have feelings, but we're not even sure what we're feeling or how to name it. And I'm such a big believer in somatic healing and how important it is to go into your body, because this stuff definitely gets stored. You see people also who have physical manifestations of holding things in their bodies, where they're getting headaches all the time and they're hunched over and they don't even see the connection that they're holding on to so many of these implicit memories.
100%. I think chapter 8, I talk about when we have a wound, it has to go somewhere. We try to act it out. If we can't act it out, we suppress it. When we suppress enough of ourselves, inflammation starts, in the body. And the inflammation can manifest in many different ways and create disease in the body. And I'm a firm believer that unprocessed implicit memory, trauma in the body, not being able to go there and process it in a way will manifest into something else. So it's really important for your own health. I remember being in a relationship, and I'm sure some of your listeners will really resonate with this. And I remember being in a relationship where it was really unhealthy because my nervous system was in a constant state of fight or flight, and there was a lot of chaos. And I remember thinking to myself, if I continue to live in this constant chaos, in this constant state of fight or flight, and I know what neurochemicals are being released, what stress hormones are released, I'm going to get cancer. I'm going to get sick. I just knew it. I was like, as much as I love this person and as much as the familiar pull is there and as hard as it is to leave, I knew that if I stayed in that environment and didn't heal, that eventually that environment would not give me enough safety for my body to function in a way to keep me healthy. And eventually that definitely will manifest in other areas.
That's a powerful thing. The more attuned you become to yourself and what's going on in your body, the more you recognize my nervous system is not happy. My nervous system is telling me something about this relationship that I need to pay attention to. And I remember, like, all my earlier relationships were based on those highs and lows and the anxiety that I felt, that I thought was love and lust and all those things. And a couple of years ago, I met somebody who was a very inconsistent communicator. I felt very insecure in his presence, which I don't usually feel, and my nervous system was a mess. And I just said, "This is not working." Like, I addressed all the things I needed. He was not able to be any of those things for me, and it was just not a good fit. But old me would have stayed and worked harder and tried to make it work. And I think that's a big shift when you start to do this work.
Yeah, I think that when you're looking at insecure attachments, we're looking at the three styles. There's a younger part of you that learned to adapt in a particular way, whether that's to try harder or ignore or people please. When you come from a more secure foundation, it's not that you don't get into these situations, it's that you leave. You don't stay into these situations. You're faster to leave. When I was in one relationship, I talk about in Safe, I stayed because it was my familiar home being recreated. And all of a sudden, I was living in neglect. And all of a sudden, I had a partner who was using a lot of substances. And so, this very young little girl in me was re experiencing what it felt like in my home. And I had someone help me realize that this was more about that part of me longing for my father, who was high, and that part of me living in a home that didn't have a lot of connection, and seeing my partner as a wounded little boy at the time, like seeing his woundedness, but not making it about him anymore. I was able to like kind of change my level of conscious awareness and say, okay, he's in a really wounded place. He's using substances, but what this is awakening in me is a very young part of me. And this has deeper roots than what is happening in the here and now. And so it's really, I talk about breaking trauma bonds in chapter 7, and that's a really powerful shift because it gets you out of those loops that you're constantly in, helps you realize the core wound that's being repeated, and it helps you getting out of blaming your partner and your partner's behavior for everything. I'm not saying to your listeners, hear me, that you should accept poor behavior from your partner. I'm just saying the reason why you stay and that behavior, the origin of that behavior could have deeper roots inside of you, and to get conscious of those deeper roots will actually help you make a better decision and like get you out of like the here and now dynamic and kind of deepen your own healing journey, and where you can really go with what's kind of being awakened within the relationship. I think every relationship is pretty much a portal in, so that's important.
Those are very wise words. And I was told that it takes like 7 times to leave a highly toxic partner. Like you try, you leave, you come back, you leave, you come back. And I think without this kind of healing, there's a reason we're drawn back in until we finally leave. And I remember a friend of mine who was married to somebody who was so self centered and very narcissistic. She kept coming back. And she finally looked up narcissism in the dictionary and she went, oh, this is never going to change. Like it took seeing it in print for her to say, I can't work harder on this. This is never going to be anything other than what it is. And she's happily remarried to somebody who's safe and that they're both in a really happy relationship. But it does take time until you can heal, until you really work on some of these real deep core wounds. You're going to keep getting drawn back in, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you can try to take it out of the relationship, but if there's a young part of you that wants to escape, who plays a role and hasn't healed from the neglect you might have experienced or your earlier wounds, you're going to be viscerally drawn to the familiar. And I think as you heal, and I talk about in, I don't believe like 7 times or whatever, but I talk about when implicit wounds match in a relationship, and we'll call it a trauma bond, like there's enough resonance between two people through their suffering that you blur your lines of boundaries. You can over identify with the other person's wounded parts, neglect your own. Other things that can happen is that what your partner's going through could be familiar. Like, my partner struggled with substance abuse, and that was familiar because my dad struggled with substance abuse. When there's that overlapping implicit pull of what feels regular for us, it is very hard for us to leave those situations. And so it takes a lot of work to shift out. And, I do provide that in the book, but it was a journey out for me, away from a more chaotic relationship. And all I said is I want safety and I want peace. And then I went and got safety and I got peace. And I was like, oh, there's more work for me to do. Because the chaos of those relationships can actually keep you preoccupied with what's going on outside you. And they can actually be distracting what's going on inside of you. So I think once you finally get away, if you're listening or you're thinking about leaving, you actually need a lot of support. You need a lot of support with what might come up, because you can get away. You relationship that's highly turbulent, and your neuroception of safety could say, get out, this is bad, they're not right. And then you leave and your neuroception goes to safety versus danger. And then, oh my God, all the times I missed him or her come flooding to the surface because your system's not feeling danger anymore. So then you'll go back, right? And then you're back in there's a honeymoon phase. Then you're back, and then all of a sudden there's all this danger again because the behaviors and the things start happening, and your system is telling you to get away. And so you can, so you can see just with one relationship, your system can go from danger to safety. And when you're in a place of safety, you start to miss the person. And I don't care. Like, it's like people are like, oh, this person's so bad. You know, when you're with someone for a really long time, even if they were horrible at the end, there are usually really good years or really good moments or times when you felt really connected that will float back up to the surface once you have the space and the safety. You are going to miss that, the good parts, right? Like, I think that's really normal. But once you go back, if nothing has changed in the relationship dynamic, you'll find yourself in the same patterns again.
That's an interesting thing. I think that people don't realize that there's a reason why you're drawn back in, and we tend to remember the good. And there is good. I mean, we wouldn't like these people if it was all bad, obviously. I'm wondering about highly sensitive people and the connection to attachment to others, and whether highly sensitive people have a harder time with healing their attachment wounds.
You know, I don't know a lot about highly sensitive people since I come from a relational neuroscience background, but I do know with anxiously attached individuals who have that as a primary adapter, which is me. I wrote the book on it, but also what the infant does or what the young person does is because mom is inconsistent. So she's here sometimes she's dysregulated or primary caregiver or dad. I don't want to be stereotypical. So the baby senses, someone's there, someone's not there. But one of the things that we do is we leave our energy centers, we leave our body, and we attune to the person. So we go to the other person and we go to the environment. So I sometimes think that highly sensitive people are more anxiously attached, and they are, in order to adapt to survive, they learn to read the environment more. They learn to read other people's needs more. So they're more adaptive in that way. And so they fit that bracket better. Where like an avoidantly attached person learns to give up over there and they become a little bit more self-focused. So it's different. They're not as aware of everybody else's needs. Where an anxiously attached person, like I could tell you what my dog needs right now. I'll tell you what my dog needs sometimes before what I need. We're just really attuned. We make really good therapists. We make really good friends, and we are really sensitive. And one of the things that if you are a highly sensitive person or you fall more in the anxious attachment is self-abandonment. And that self-abandonment is an adaptive strategy to read the room and have, your internal room becomes where a sense of safety, your neuroception is heightened. And I think that all like boils down to attachment theory. I mean, that's how I make sense of it all.
It makes total sense. And most of my clients who call themselves HSPs or highly sensitive people are anxiously attached and tend to abandon themselves and have contorted themselves in relationships. And that's the healing, is recognizing what your pattern is and to begin to heal that from within. And they're able to forge healthier relationships when they work on those ways of attaching. A lot of people misunderstand attachment as first of all, it's fixed. I was born this way. I'm anxiously attached. But why do I had a friend who was always pretty secure. I would say in all of her relationships, she was the one who was pursued and she was proposed to multiple times. And then she meets this guy who's inconsistent, and all of a sudden she's insecurely attached and she's becoming more anxious, and she's like, what is happening to me? So let's talk a little bit about carrying multiple attachment styles or patterns and why we need to know this.
Yeah, I mean, this is such a deep dive. And one of the free things that I'm giving your audience, well, I might as well say the two free. One of them is a 40-minute conversation with me and my mentor talking about what it feels like in your body to move from insecurity to security. But the other one is beyond the labels. And so in Safe, I talk about the wheel of attachment. It's hard to explain here, but I can talk about it. Like the bottom is secure, the top is disorganized, and then we have anxious and avoidant. So it looks like a square. And in one household, we can experience all of these patterns. So we can have a mom who's really secure sometimes and then shifts up to anxiety, right? And as the anxiety increases, we get to disorganized. as the avoidance increases, we get to disorganize. So I talk about in the book the wheel of attachment and going through your childhood, but also understanding attachment from a more holistic end. This is the wheel. This is how we get to disorganize. This is how we get to security. And by the way, your dad could be disorganized, avoidant, and still have pockets of security. That we're never just one attachment pattern. We're rarely one pattern. We can identify, like I identified in my romantic relationships, not so much anymore. I showed up anxiously attached, clearly. But doesn't mean that I didn't have avoidant protectors. It didn't mean I didn't have pockets of disorganized. I talk about my pockets of disorganized. And I think it's really important, for those who are listening that understand attachment, like this is about understanding attachment in a more holistic and organic way and seeing it full picture. So I provide like beyond the labels and this wheel you'll get immediately. If you fill out the form that Sandy has left, you'll get this wheel and you'll be able to start playing around with the wheel and seeing how with your sister you might have showed up anxious because she was super clingy or avoidant or, like you're starting to see a more holistic picture and different relationships because attachment is a relational experience. It's a two-person experience. So if Sandy's really avoidant, my anxious parts might come out. If you're really secure, something else might come up for me, right? If you're really like it really depends on two people's embedded patterns and how those patterns create a relational dance. And we can have many different relational dances with many different people.
Yeah, that the wheel of attachment is so interesting, and I'm excited for people to get it as a download and also to buy the book and get the whole thing because I think it's such important work. Let's talk about as we come to an end. A practice from the book, Safe, that listeners can start using right away if they feel stuck or lonely or overwhelmed.
A lot of the book Safe is about going into your experiences and going deeper, but one of the things is resourcing safety. So if you have a person in your life now who's truly safe, a pet, someone from your past that is safe, like my grandmother was, you can go back into those memories and you can resource the felt sense of what it's like to be around that person or be in that place. Or if you have that person now, it's about resourcing what does it feel like to be in the company of my friend Sandy? How does it feel in my body? Does it feel warm? Can I start focusing on the felt sense of safety from either my past or my current relationship so that my body starts to recognize that warmth and consistency and availability are the ingredients that I desire for a relationship, and I can start practicing what they feel like because I have experienced it at least once in my life.
I think a lot of people don't even realize that they have that level of safety in their lives in some way, because often we just look at our parents and we look at our caregivers and we don't realize there was a safe adult in our lives growing up, or we have a good friend or a child that we relate to, or anything. I mean, it really can come from a pet, as you say.
Yeah, I mean, pets are amazing co-regulators. I feel you if you're listening. You're like, I had horrible parents. It could be a teacher. I was lucky to have an amazing grandmother. Not that my parents were horrible, but I had a very nurturing grandmother. But yeah, resourcing it from the past and starting to look for that now and really the felt sense of what it's like to be in the presence of something that really feels safe. It's important to practice that. And I have a somatic meditations that help you kind of cultivate that more in your body so you can manifest more of that in your life.
This kind of brings us full circle back to when you feel dysregulated in somebody's presence and you start to recognize that, also recognizing this person feels safe. So I think both are important when we recognize that we're feeling totally out of whack, and our body is starting to feel tight, and we start to understand, like, what does that mean, as opposed to really feeling that felt sense of safety with somebody, which is, it's not always common. I think especially as we're beginning to heal, it's not always common. We're tracking for lack of safety rather than safety. And I think that when we can recognize the safe people in our lives and they help us heal. And I think a lot of people feel like I have to heal everything before I go on the next date. So let's go to our last question, which is any final words of advice for anyone who wants to go on their last first date?
Just because someone makes you feel unsafe in your body doesn't mean that that person is unsafe.
Mm,
And that's a really important, just because someone makes you feel unsafe in your body, it could be what they're doing, their behaviors are waking up something in you that was once unsafe before. So it's not always about eliminating the person. Sometimes
mm.
it's like, oh, when this person does these behaviors, my body does this. Let's see what's really activated, the earlier parts, because I don't want people to listen to this and be like, when you don't feel safe in front of someone, that's time to get rid of them. That's not true. When you don't feel safe in front of someone, it's time to get really curious about what part of you is being woken up. Is it an old part? Is it a new part? And if you have the capacity, what the hell is going on with the other person, right? Because there might be something going on for them that's incredibly scary for them to be even acting that way. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, thank
Um,
you.
and what was the last question? Something about
Any final words of advice for somebody who wants to go on their last first date?
Dating and implicit attraction is so complicated. I think that fast, fast, fast goes the anxious heart. So go as slow as possible, process truthfully and honestly with yourself and your anchors when you're dating. Take it slow. Slow and steady really win the race. And intensity, and I talk about intensity being mistaken for love. Intensity is something you want to be very, very mindful of.
No, that's for sure, especially the people who attach so quickly. Slow it down, really understand what's going on here, get to know somebody, know what you need in a relationship. Jessica, this has been amazing. I love that you wrote this book, that it's out in the world. I hope everybody goes out and gets it and gets the free gift. There'll be a link here for that. If you want to share one link that people can go to learn more about you, that would be great.
Oh, if you go to Jessica Baum LMHC, you can find me on Instagram. And if you do read the book and it resonates or touches something in you, I respond to everyone personally. So you can reach out to me personally. I actually really appreciate people when they read and they come and they give me feedback and they let me know. And I'm, to the best of my ability, I'm responding to everyone that reaches out. So again, you can find me on Instagram. If you want to reach out. And then I have the Conscious Relationship Group, which is a group of like 7 therapists. We all work with attachment issues together in this way. So that can also be found fairly easily online. So
Well, thank you for the work that you do and how you're helping people to really heal from attachment wounds, from abandonment, all these things that we carry through our life, and we can actually heal and have healthy relationships. This work is so, so important. Thank you again.
thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And thanks everybody for listening. If you love our show, please give us a high rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and share with your friends. And as always, here's to your last first date. If you are ready to get unstuck, gain new tools, become more empowered, and finally find your last first date, I'd love to talk to you. Fill out an application to be considered for a complimentary half-hour love breakthrough session at lastfirstdate.com/application.